The grass is always greener. Chapter 3. The expression on his father's face after Lloyd accused him of breaking his promise was hard to describe. Shocked was the most obvious emotion. Disbelief was also very clear. And there was also horror and bewilderment. It reminded him a lot of how his father had reacted when he nearly lost his arm after the mess with the fire generals. Why was he so surprised, though? Did he seriously not think Lloyd wouldn't find out he was doing evil again? If he was trying to keep it secret, why destroy things so close to where Lloyd was? How did Lloyd get here anyway? Did he get knocked out? Were his friends here to rescue him? Focus! He could ask questions later. At that moment, he needed to focus on the matter at hand. Defeat his evil father now, freak out later. Speaking of which, why was everyone staring at him? Even his friends were staring at him wide-eyed from out of their ninja hoods, and he could tell their mouths were gaping open beneath them. Squinting in the dim evening light, wasn't it around noon a second ago? He also had to wonder if their uniforms had always looked like that. Oddly enough, he didn't see Nia anywhere. It was unlike her to miss out on any of the action. She lived for this kind of stuff. What was going on? Finally, his father broke the son's silence. Son? He asked in shock, almost dropping the heavy golden staff he was holding. Lloyd eyed the gleaming staff dubiously. Something about the intricate gold item set him on edge. He'd never known something could radiate the feeling of power before now, but that staff sure looked and felt a lot like what Lloyd had pictured in his head when Master Wu had told him and his team about the ultimate weapon. What, did you find a new toy to conquer the city with? He asked, his voice taking on more of a bite at the lack of answers. You promised, Dad, he repeated again. His father gave no response and was now looking back and forth at Lloyd and the staff repeatedly, as if trying to make sense of some impossible riddle. Someone else took the opportunity to speak up instead. Lloyd, is that really you? Kai asked, finally stepping forward from where he, Jay, Zane, and Cole had been watching in shock. His voice sounded slightly off, but Lloyd chalked it up to smoke inhalation. The building behind them had been on fire not too long ago. Thankfully, the flames seemed to have gone out now. However, at the question, a bolt of icy fear shot through the green ninja. Suddenly, his lack of understanding and the others' confused looks took on a far more sinister edge. Had he been kidnapped or something? Drugged so he wouldn't realize time was passing? If so, why? How long had he been gone? Why had he... Focus! Evil father. Army of snakes? That was new. Since when did his father give up the ocean aesthetic? And didn't the Serpentines still hate him? Save the day and then question the weirdness. Speaking of questions, he still needed to answer Kai's. Yeah, it's me, he said, wondering if his apparent abduction had somehow altered his appearance. He didn't feel any different. But the way his friends were all looking at him, like he was some kind of alien creature, he had to force down the urge to abandon the fight to find a mirror. He hadn't suddenly sprouted forearms like his dad, had he? Focus! Jay looked like he was about to say something, but his father recovered his voice first. I don't understand. His dad, Garmadon. If he was going to be evil again, he should stop calling him Dad. He'd lost that right, said, still staring at his new staff in bewilderment. This is not what I wanted. This is not what I wished for. A lot of things still didn't make sense. But if Lord, what's my name? Garmadon had given some sort of magic wish-granting device, then the resulting confusion was probably to be expected. No way he could resist using such a thing at the first opportunity. And if that didn't get Lloyd's blood boiling. Eyes flashing furiously, the green ninja started stalking towards him in a way that had both Cole and Zane rushing forwards just to hold him. Are you kidding me? You get some magic wish-granting thing and the first thing you do is go right back to being evil? You promised, Dad. You promised you'd stop being evil. He snapped for a third time, struggling against the earth and ice ninja's grips. If anything, Lord Garmadon, and everyone else for that matter, looked even more bewildered at his words. What are you talking about? He asked. I never promised such a thing. Lloyd let out a growl of frustration. Was he serious right now? It was on live television, Dad, he said bitingly. I heard you. Mom heard you. The whole city heard you. But Lord Garmadon continued to be contrary. That is impossible, he said firmly. But another glance at his golden staff seemed to give him some sort of idea. Unless, he added slowly, the mega weapon somehow pulled you through time. What even? Lloyd was beginning to give up hope of ever understanding anything at this point. At least everyone else seemed to be catching on to what his father was inferring from the way his friends all stiffened around him, and the Serpentine's face as flashed with some kind of understanding. Nodding in conclusion to his apparent epiphany, his father looked up to meet Lloyd's eyes once again. Listen, Lloyd, he said in what he must have thought was a gentle tone. I know things seem confusing right now, but whatever else he said was drowned out by a sudden roaring in Lloyd's ears as he froze and had an epiphany of his own. Lloyd! Not Lloyd! Lloyd! The four-armed man in front of him had just said his name correctly, something his father would never do. Suddenly, all the inconsistencies he'd noticed flashed through his mind. The strange weapon, the snakes, the odd looks, the lack of memory of his promise. More began popping up as he looked at him, too. Subtle differences in appearance, the new armor, the bone helmet instead of his helm of darkness or whatever he called it. A lot of things still didn't make sense, but one thing was now crystal clear. You're not my father, Lloyd gasped, making everyone stare at him once again. In that instant, Lloyd was overcome by a mixture of utter relief and piercing fear. Relief because his dad has kept his word. He wasn't evil, and the joy of that realization was overwhelming. He hadn't realized he'd been so scared of such a thing happening until faced with the possibility of it coming true. And fear, because if this man wasn't his father, then who was he and what could he possibly want? The imposter wearing Lord Garmadon's face pinched his brow. Lloyd, I am your father, he said, still in his somewhat calming tone. Listen to me. The mega weapon must have... No, Lloyd insisted, shaking his head vehemently. You're not my dad. Dad never... But before Lloyd could say what his father would never do, a gust of wind blew over them as an impressive red mech flew down from the sky, followed by a massive four-headed dragon in a flying ship that looked similar to his uncle's Destiny's Bounty. Not far behind them, the sound of police sirens filled the air, signaling that the cop cars they belonged to would be arriving not long after. The Garmadon imposter narrowed his eyes at the sight of the approaching cavalry and bellowed, Retreat! Instantly, he and the remaining snakes vanished into the darkness of the evening shadows, leaving only the destruction they'd caused as any evidence of being there in the first place. With their enemies gone, Cole and Zane finally let go of Lloyd. But were they really Cole and Zane? When he turned to face them, he saw that they, along with Jay and Kai, had removed their hoods, revealing faces that looked eerily similar to his friends, but still clearly different enough to not actually be them. Cole's hair was shorter and swept to the side, and come to think of it, he couldn't remember the last time he'd seen the Earth Ninja wear sleeves like this one was. Jay's hair was less curly, his freckles were absent from his face, and there was a nick in his eyebrow that hadn't been there before. Kai's hair was still spiky as ever, but his signature scar was on the wrong side of his face, and he was glowering with a look of suspicion Lloyd had never seen before. Zane looked almost the same, but his eyes lacked their vivid blue glow, and his expression felt more earnest than the ninja Lloyd knew usually gave. And from the way they were eyeing him up and down, he got the feeling they were studying him just as much as he was studying them. In the end, the Jay look-alike summed it up best for all of them. What the heck is going on?